We are back with the 12th episode of the Hubscale podcast. Now, this week is slightly different from our usual guests. We have Michael Cortez, a partner at YL Ventures, a venture capital firm with a sole focus on investment in early stage cybersecurity startups out of Israel. I am very excited about this one. Michael, it's great to have you on.
Hey, thanks, Elliot. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no problem at all. No problem. And I guess so everybody listening who doesn't know Michael Cortez, could you give a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So I'm a partner here at YL Ventures. I've been here about 3.5 years now. I focus a lot on business development issues for the firm, for both ourselves as a firm, for YL Ventures, as well as for our portfolio companies. There's a really big emphasis here on kind of strategic and tactical support for early stage go-to-market activities for all of our portcos. And so I run a lot of that. I also serve kind of a board observer roles for many of our portfolio companies, financial analysis, pipeline support, executive recruiting, fundraising strategy, heavily involved in the pre-investment process as well, working with our team in Israel, due diligence, industry research, kind of helping identify what we think are going to be the next big cybersecurity startups. And I also work extensively with our venture advisory board of CISOs around the US and around the world.
Awesome. No, that's absolutely fantastic. And I know you and I have been probably acquainted for a year and a half or so, but no, it's amazing to see your journey as well. So I guess diving into YL Ventures, obviously specific focus on cybersecurity, Israeli backed individuals. So just give us a quick intro to YL.
Yeah, happy to. So I like to describe YL as sort of having a dual center of gravity or sort of a dual geographic focus. We've got offices here in Silicon Valley where I'm based, but also in Tel Aviv. We manage 5 different funds, 800 million in total assets under management. And we're really focused on kind of one thing. So really finding and supporting, really talented, brilliant Israeli cybersecurity entrepreneurs from even before they've landed on an idea, all the way up into including kind of an IPO. So we really have a singular and really disciplined strategy. It's exclusively in Israeli seed stage cybersecurity startups. And we leverage really what we think is an industry-leading kind of value-add platform in-house, really multidisciplinary professionals and a large network of experts, CISOs, InfoSec, privacy people all across the world to really kind of support, those portfolio companies' growth and success. We have, like I said, 5 funds in total, 800 million total management. We're investing now out of our 5th fund. And we really have kind of a core belief that, it's never too early to start investing in really strong teams with viable and innovative ideas. So we like to get involved with people as early as possible. We like to say it's never too early to start talking with YL Ventures. And we're really trying to help kind of really talented founders grow little kernels of ideas in cybersecurity into, industry or category, certainly category leading companies. I guess maybe a couple of companies that you guys might have heard of, just sort of noting our kind of track record here. Companies like Axonius, Orca Security, and then a few high-profile acquisitions you may have heard of. Companies like Twistlock, which was acquired by Palo Alto Networks, Hexadite, acquired by Microsoft, Medigate, a company I worked very closely with, acquired by Clarity earlier this year. And then we've got a whole portfolio that I'd be happy to talk about of really promising earlier stage companies as well.
Yeah, no, sounds very exciting, and notable ones there like Axonius and Orca Security. They're awesome vendors as well, just like the rest of the portfolio. So now, just diving into that, then, how does YL Ventures support their portfolio companies?
Yeah, great question. So I like to think about it in, I guess, several different buckets, but fundamentally, all the different kind of buckets of support, as I alluded to earlier, this sort of multidisciplinary approach. They all kind of serve the same purpose, right? Which is, essentially helping a really talented team with a really great idea, build a product, find product market fit, come over to the US, find their first few design partners, convert those to paying customers, and really set the foundation, kind of for long-term success. So everything we do is kind of focused with that one goal in mind. But as I mentioned, I think that there are several different kind of categories to that. So first, I could talk about this as near and dear to my heart because it's what I spend a lot of my time doing is sort of customers and business development. So, we have a US-based team of experts here on the investment team that work alongside me that really connect our founders with potential design partners, early customers. And importantly, this happens even before investing. So, we've got a venture advisory board now of, I think, 115 plus CISOs around the world. And we're having them talk to these people, even before we've made an investment decision. So those kind of kernels of who are going to be the design partners, what is the MVP going to look like? Those are starting to really take shape, even before we make an investment decision. And we do that because, it kind of helps us prove out, the ideas and prove out the team. And also, regardless of the investment decision we make, we want to be, beneficial to the cybersecurity community. And we think that putting, really smart men and women in front of, potential buyers or design partners is just kind of good for the ecosystem as a whole. So we're more than happy to do that. I would say on average, more than half of our portfolio companies, early customers are sourced directly through our network. And in some cases, it's many more than that. So I'm very proud of that. So, and also, apart from just the introductions, it's kind of helping them through the process, right? So go-to-market strategies, POC scoping, working through procurement for the first time, what should your pricing model look like, et cetera. So there's a lot of focus on customers and BD. The second bucket is really on marketing. So we have an incredibly talented marketing team based in Tel Aviv that function as both, in-house marketing for YL, but more importantly, they kind of help our early stage companies through those critical initial marketing and branding stages, and a lot with PR. So whenever there's a launch or a new product or a follow-on financing or something like that, they're really doing a lot to kind of get the word out there, as a lot of our companies are kind of in greenfield spaces. They're trying to kind of create new categories. And frankly, it's not really, most of the time, it's not really a core skill set of cybersecurity founders, being able to kind of do that marketing frame, positioning, messaging work. And so, we're really proud of the help that we do, both from, pre-launch, post-launch, and ongoing. So it could be things like helping with campaigns, lead gen, but also just kind of messaging and creating content. Another bucket is around HR. So this is another kind of key focus for early stage startups, is how do you find really talented people to join your team? How do you kind of convince them that it's going to kind of be worth it? And so, we have a HR expert who's amazing, based in Tel Aviv, that really helps with a lot of kind of the core, engineering roles, UX, UI roles, et cetera, that are going to be based there. And then we also work really closely with a number of amazing recruiting firms that are kind of based around the rest of the world, that kind of help our companies with things like go-to-market leadership. So helping find, a salesperson, an in-house marketing person, sales engineers, BDRs, et cetera. And so, as the company grows, we kind of adapt what we're kind of helping with from an HR standpoint to kind of where they're at in terms of their maturity. But I think that that's a critical part as well. And then the last two things I'll mention, I think, are kind of go hand in hand. One is our CISO in Residence program. So we have an amazing CISO in Residence now named Frank Kim. We've had I think he's our fourth person since we piloted this program around the time that I joined. So we started with a man named Roger Hale, who's amazing. Then we had Sunil Yu, most recently Ryan Gurney, and now Frank Kim. So really all of them, luminaries in the cybersecurity world, amazingly helpful. And to be able to have an in-house CISO who can, kind of help working with our portfolio companies pre and post investment in a really hands-on way is, I think, really differentiating and really, really important. And then that dovetails with, our venture advisory board. So I mentioned this earlier, but this was launched in 2018. If I remember correctly, and now it's expanded to about 115 CISOs, chief privacy officers, et cetera, kind of all around the world, at all different types of companies, different stages, different sizes, different industries. And that's obviously a source for, early design partners, for customer feedback, for helping shape the MVP, but it's also a source for just kind of advice, feedback, as companies are growing, developing, get them together every 2 weeks. I do these things called office hours. We were really just trying to kind of bring these two communities together. We view our role, I guess, as sort of being the connective tissue, between sort of the customer market, large enterprises in the United States, and then, is brilliantly talented men and women working on, cutting edge problems in cybersecurity in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, no, honestly, that sounds so exciting. You're bringing a community together as well. I guess just kind of taking it back a little bit, because obviously you offer a lot to cybersecurity startups at that stage. Does it differ? Does some companies want more of them solutions you're talking about there, or is it kind of one package solution for everybody?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say it does differ, although all of our portfolio companies avail themselves of each of those buckets to one degree or another. I think a lot of it is a function of the different skill sets and the previous experience of the founders, what they're good at, what they feel most confident in, and then where they maybe need more support. And I think there's a little bit of it that's a function of, what kind of subset within cybersecurity they're focused on. So I would say broad strokes, all of our companies, leverage all of these different parts of our value add program. But just to give you one example, if we're working with, a second time founder or a team that's, kind of done this before, that's built up, early startup, they might need less help, getting off the ground, right? Kind of in the early stages, they kind of know, maybe they have, for example, HR, maybe they have a really strong team of people from their previous company that they know they're going to bring alongside. So for their first 15 employees, they've already got them earmarked, they've already got them kind of, identified. And so they need kind of less help on that front. So that could be one example where, depending on where they're coming from and what their skill set are, they might need more or less help. So I would say all of them do all of it, but to different degrees, again, depending on the profile of the founders and the company.
Yeah, no, for sure. That sounds it's so exciting. I think any company who's got that kind of community to walk into as well, especially from the start, it's just amazing. And I read obviously online as well, you've got an office in Silicon Valley and you've got one in Israel as well. Just tell me a little bit more why the two locations.
Yeah, another good question. So, I mentioned this earlier, this kind of connective tissue idea. Our firm was really started to be that bridge from really talented Israeli entrepreneurs to get them over, land and expand in the US, really find a foothold here, find their product market fit, and then expand geographically, beyond the US once that sort of fit is established. And so I think being in Silicon Valley, being close to so many exciting other startups, being close to so many investors that are going to be leading, the Series A's, the Series B's, and growth investors in our portfolio companies, it just kind of puts us in the best position to kind of be that anchor, here in the United States. But I should also mention, we have people spread around the country. So we have, some people in Utah, we have some people in New York, we have people kind of all over the place. And now, as we sit here kind of at the end of 2022, we're obviously a lot more distributed than we were 3 or 4 years ago. So, but I think that the being centered here in Silicon Valley is sort of the perfect place for us to kind of be that sort of landing point for companies coming over to the US. And it's because of kind of our proximity to, other investors, to other innovative startups, to potential customers. I think it just kind of gives us the best possible positioning.
No, for sure. No, that sounds very exciting. Again, I think it's a great location for one. But so now I wanna switch this back because this is the question I've been dying to ask. What are the key drivers that you are looking for when assessing in early stage investments?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that there are a few things. I mean, I think that, first and foremost, when we're thinking about when you're a seed stage investor, I think the most critical thing is the team itself. Certainly you need an idea that's validated, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I think first and foremost, we look at the cooperative dynamics, the track record of the team. Have they spent time together in a work context previously? What's going to be their separation of responsibilities? How do their specific backgrounds really tie into what their roles are going to be within the startup? And we also rely heavily on references. So this is another reason why, the importance of having boots on the ground in such a big community in Tel Aviv is really a strength and really a benefit to us, is it allows us to kind of do, references and really get to know people, spending time with people and kind of getting to know what makes them tick. So I'd say first and foremost, it's kind of understanding the team and understanding why they're particularly well suited, to the problem that they're trying to solve. My favorite investments are always the one where a team has lived a problem, in the past, and the company that they're trying to build is trying to address, a problem that they've experienced. I think many times those are kind of the most compelling and often the most successful stories. So that's kind of first and foremost. After the team, I think we want to look for people that have big visions, people that are addressing big problems in cybersecurity, but they're doing it in a way that, we think could be sort of a big company. So if you look at companies like Axonius, Orca, Twistlock in our portfolio, they may have started with sort of a relatively narrow scope, but there was always this vision of what it could be, one day if kind of everything goes according to plan. And so we're looking for people that kind of have big visions. We're looking for people that have a lot of motivation. I mean, it's a highly competitive, highly difficult, incredibly stressful job to be a startup founder. And you really need people that have stamina, that have passion, that have grit, competitiveness, and really that vision that I alluded to. I think you need people that that can kind of articulate that vision. I think this is important as well. So, oftentimes startup founders aren't necessarily, maybe they don't have a lot of experience kind of selling, right? And so it can be difficult for them to sort of translate what's in their mind or what their vision is into a way that's really tangible, that customers can really, grab onto and get excited about. And so people that can really kind of articulate that. And then, obviously a big addressable market. I think that kind of goes without saying, but we rely a lot on our venture advisory board to kind of help inform us, what the CISO community, what the InfoSec community, what the problems are that they're, trying to solve, what are sort of the areas that are ripe for disruption or ripe for innovation. And so we're kind of trying to balance, the feedback or the information we're getting from our advisory board here in the US with the ideas that we have, coming from Israel. And when those kind of two things meet, that's when we get really excited.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you mentioned a couple of things there about kind of people. Like there's a lot of stuff that you need to look for in an individual, in an entrepreneur, to make that investment as well. So talk to me a little bit about what you look for in entrepreneurs.
Yeah, so I think that I'll go back to sort of some of those buzzwords, and it's a little ephemeral. It's a little hard to define because it's part of I think what makes the best venture capital investors is people that have just done it for a long time and have a lot of pattern recognition. You can kind of see traits in people. You can kind of see personality aspects very quickly in just a few number of meetings. But again, I think it comes down to stamina, passion, grit, determination, competitiveness, and kind of that big vision. I think, and the ability to kind of clearly articulate, be customer facing, to an extent. Obviously, we'll help you with that, and that's what we do a lot, on the customer side, business development side. And you're eventually going to hire a sales leader, but at the beginning, it's really going to be a founder-led sales motion. And so it's really important to be able to kind of be that customer-facing person or have somebody on your founding team that can kind of play that role and to be able to kind of articulate what that vision is. But I think that those are kind of the most important things. As I mentioned earlier, it's an incredibly stressful, incredibly difficult journey. And if it takes a really unique, I think, personality type to be well suited to managing kind of the emotional roller coaster of being a founder. I like to think that part of our job as investors is to, kind of be, what's the word I'm looking for? Not life coaches, but I don't know, like shoulders, right? For founders to kind of lean on. And so when people get too excited, it's kind of our job to bring them back down to earth a little bit. When people get too low, it's our job to kind of build them back up. And I think to have that kind of personality where you can kind of maintain a pretty even keel, but still kind of maintain all of those aspects that I mentioned earlier, stamina, passion, grit, competitiveness, vision, et cetera. It takes a unique person. So I think that those are the things that, it's a little hard to identify, in the first meeting, but after you talk to people, you get to know them, you spend some time with them in person, you can start to kind of see that taking shape.
Yeah. No, for sure. And it's obviously an exciting journey going through it with all these entrepreneurs as well. The crazy journey from seed to leaders, of course, is Wild's motto. So tell me a little bit about it. You mentioned there, obviously, going through the process with entrepreneurs. What's it like going through due diligence, and what do you look for when going through that with entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I think there's sort of two components of it. One is sort of the team component, and one is the idea validation component. So on the team component, like any job interview, right? There's some back channel references. We're trying to get a sense for what people are like to work with, both people that have worked below them and above them, and as peers. So we're trying to get a sense for like what's somebody like in kind of a work context. We're trying to get a sense for what's somebody like, in a stressful situation. How to kind of people respond to different challenges. No different really than any kind of interview you were doing for a normal job. But we also like to spend a lot of time with the team, both personally, inside the office, outside of the office, go have a meal with somebody, get to know them on a personal level. These are going to be people that we're going to be working with, for the next 3, 5, 7 years of our lives. And so I think, as important as it is to find a founder, and vice versa, from a founder's perspective, as important as it is to find an investor partner, from just a business perspective, it's also important to find people that you like working with, and that you like spending time with. And so I think you can't discount that as well. So there's a real kind of get to know you phase, of kind of building a relationship with founders that I think is really critical. And then I think, obviously on the idea validation standpoint, we rely really heavily on our venture advisory board. We have an amazing team in Israel that does a lot of primary research. So market sizing, competitive analysis, landscaping, what are the other players, who's established vendors, kind of like when Gartner or 451 or Forrester, one of these companies does kind of their market maps, we do a lot of that research, market sizing. So what's going to be the TAM for something like this over time? And so we kind of blend those two things together. We really need feedback from the customer community, the CISOs here in the United States, that say, this is a real problem that needs solving. This is a top 5 priority for me. If this existed tomorrow, I would love to POC it. These are the kind of things that we love to hear. And then at the same time, we need to get comfort around, the founder's background, their drive, their motivations, and what they're like personally, what they're like to work with.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, it sounds, again, it sounds cool going through that process. But so I want to go into the next topic, Michael. I think because a lot of my network and a lot of the listeners on this side will be either the go-to-market or the leadership style individuals, maybe based in the US or around the world. So what is the benefit of joining a venture capital backed startup?
So in the sense of if you were like a VP sales or a chief marketing officer, is that what you mean? What's sort of the benefit of joining?
Yeah, I just mean in general. I mean, anybody who wants to join a startup rather than, say, a public vendor,
Yeah.
the VC backside as well.
Yeah, I think that, fundamentally it comes down to personality traits a little bit, and then kind of risk tolerance. So I think that, the earlier you join a startup, the potential upside financially at least is much, much higher, but there's also certainly more risk, right? So if you're going to join an established vendor, a publicly traded cybersecurity company, you kind of have the benefit of full information, when you're doing that. Your upside might be somewhat limited, but so is your downside. So there's sort of just a little bit of a risk reward trade-off. So I think people that are have a little bit higher risk tolerance, a little bit more comfortable kind of building, a little bit more comfortable kind of working with uncertainty, a little bit more comfortable being creative, problem solving, wearing a lot of different hats. I think the benefits, from my point of view, I'm biased obviously in the industry that I work in. I work in seed stage VC, so it's very, very kind of similar. So I kind of have my own risk tolerance, but I think that it's just sort of a function of, that trade-off of how comfortable you are kind of with that risk. But I think the upsides to it are tremendous. I think the ability to join something at the ground floor, close to the ground floor, feel like you're really working directly with the management team, feeling like, you're in the room where it happens, so to speak, where your voice really matters and every decision you make and every action you take, has direct impact on the company. I think you can't really get that, in most large companies, certainly in most publicly traded companies, but you can at a venture-backed startup. And so I think that people that are energized by that challenge, I think are people that really end up enjoying it and doing really, really well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's always interesting, even from my side on the recruitment standpoint, when you're looking for individuals who's kind of that kind of real grit and determination to go into a startup, a VC or PE backed, then the version of the individuals who don't want to do that and just stay on the public side where it's a bit more safer and they get the RSUs and everything along those lines. So I always say there's two types of people.
Yeah, well, I'd be curious, Elliot. I think in some ways there's a lot of similarities between the type of profile of a person that would want to go work for a very early, like Series A startup, and the type of person that makes for a good founder. So I'd be curious to know from your point of view, what are some personality traits or some characteristics of people you think that are well suited to working at, VC backed vendors or early stage startups?
For sure. I think one of the key points as well is, have they done a similar thing before? Because I think once you, especially when going through a recruitment process, you're asking the questions with these individuals. If they haven't done anything like this before and they say they want to do it, when they get into that role, it is a lot harder than they think. So definitely look for that kind of experience in early stage, even if it was right back in their early career, so they actually have an understanding of what it is. And again, it goes back to what you said as well about the motivation, the grit, the grind. Have they been a top performer at certain areas again, or even have they built out certain regions from scratch? And they might be in a larger organization, but have they built out a region from complete scratch with no marketing help or anything along those lines as well? So it's just really digging into the fine details of the individuals that you want to get to the organization. And especially on the sales side, you need that real grit and determination. Yeah,
for sure. A lot of similarities though. I think it's interesting.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think, that's always an interesting topic for me, because I do work with public vendors, some of the biggest in the industry, but then also the small ones as well. A couple are based out of Israel, actually. So it's definitely an interesting proposition for sure. Now, I guess I want to kind of switch it back. I think this is one of the main questions that a lot of the listeners, especially maybe director of maybe application security or things on those lines, who will be listening to this podcast. What advice to entrepreneurs can you give to actually gain investment from in a company like Wild Ventures?
Oh gosh. So advice for a potential founding team, looking for VC investment. I think also a couple of things. So one, ideally, identify a real gap and be able to articulate how that narrow gap can kind of expand over time. So I think the mistake that I see a lot of founders make when they come to pitch is they either pitch, a very narrow feature that would be something that, I could see like a CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or somebody, buying as almost like an acqui-hire. And they don't kind of articulate where they can take it over the next 5 years, potentially. Or they come and they pitch something that's so broad, that there's almost no focus to it whatsoever. And there's no kind of concept of what the MVP or the minimal, viable product is going to be. So I think that most of the time people make mistakes in one of those two directions. Either it's too narrowly focused and there's sort of no long-term vision, or it's too broad and you kind of get lost in the, this doesn't really seem feasible, or where would you start? And they're kind of not really able to articulate that. So I think that whatever sector you go into, being able to really clearly explain what the problem you're trying to solve is, who you're trying to solve it for, and how you're trying to do it. I mean, it sounds overly simplistic, but I think a lot of people just aren't able to really clearly articulate that in a few sentences, right? What's the pain point you're addressing? Who's the buyer? Who's experiencing this pain, right? And then how are you going to solve it in a differentiated way from the other companies that are already out there? And be able to explain, this is where we would start. This is what the MVP could potentially look like. This is what, inputs or tech stack I would need to get the telemetry I need to do X, Y, or Z. This is how it could potentially grow over time. Being able to explain that, I think, first and foremost, is really critically important. The other thing is, the more you can tie, your background and your skill set into the problem that you're trying to solve, I think the more compelling it becomes. If you're somebody that has experienced this problem yourself, or if you're somebody that's worked at a company that was trying to solve this problem that couldn't, or if you're somebody that, solved this problem, but in a services way, and you think you have kind of a product angle for how to do it better, those are kind of, I think, really compelling stories. Why are you as an individual, well suited to solve this pain point that you're articulating? And so if you can kind of tie those stories together, here's the problem, here's who it's for, here's how we're going to do it, here's why I'm the right person to do it. Again, it sounds overly simplistic, but I think that that's probably the best advice I can give people. If you're able to do that in a pretty succinct pitch, you'll get people's attention.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's about capturing people's attention as well. And I love your explanation there of having that kind of real background in something and finding, as you mentioned earlier on in the podcast, if somebody has experienced something and they're coming into a pitch with saying this is the solution to the problem, it's hard to ignore, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not always going to be the case, and it's not a prerequisite for success. I definitely have examples in my career where I've seen companies be incredibly successful that didn't necessarily, live or experience that pain point themselves, but they identified it and they found the right people to kind of help them, express it. But it certainly helps, if you've got that kind of experience in your resume, you can point to for why you got excited about this idea and why you think others should be excited about it too. I think that definitely gets investors' attention.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I guess I want to flip it now a little bit on Wild Ventures. So a lot of people who I speak to in the industry actually would like to get into or work for a VC or a PE firm. So anybody who's got experience within the industry, what advice would you give to people to, number one, break down the door to get into this industry, or how would you give them kind of advice to step up into something like what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I guess I can kind of talk about my background a little bit and kind of how I ended up here is maybe a helpful place to start. So, and kind of walk backwards. So most recently, before joining in the summer of 2019, I was part of the investment banking division at Goldman here in San Francisco. So pretty typical path, I think, from working in finance or investment banking, into venture. But I think what's perhaps more interesting is, before business school, I actually worked for an early stage prop tech or real estate tech startup. And, I joined when there were, very few employees. It was very small. It was a bootstrap company. And I think having that kind of dual experience of, working for a startup myself, seeing what that's like as kind of not being a founder myself, but being, very, very early employee, be able to kind of understand what that's like and empathize with that experience with founders, and then be able to kind of marry that with, my finance experience that I got in business school and at Goldman, I think kind of set me up, for the job that I have now. And so again, it goes back to, how can you tie bits and pieces of your own experience and your own resume into what you would want to be doing, within the venture community. And there's a lot of different ways to get involved. So, I talked about all the different buckets of our value add program, but whether it's, customers, business development, whether it's marketing, whether it's human resources, whether it's the CISO and residence program, if you look around the world, I think you'll see more and more VC firms starting to build out these sort of functional leadership roles. Marketing partners becoming more and more common. Partners that are kind of leading an HR function for the whole portfolio is becoming more and more common. Things like a CISO and residence program becoming more and more common. So I think you're starting to see, as VC firms themselves mature, building out these sort of functional areas. So it's really about, I think, finding, those commonalities between what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, where kind of your background fits, and then being able to kind of sell that to a VC firm as they're expanding. And keep in mind too, I guess the other piece of advice I would give is, similarly, like when new startups announce a funding round, that's often the best time to reach out about a potential job, because you can imagine that they're going to be putting that money to use, and one of the ways they're going to be doing it is hiring. Same goes for VC firms. So when they announce a new fund, often that can be a good chance to reach out, try to connect, and see if perhaps they're expanding their platform in a way that kind of fits your background.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's going to be very helpful to a lot of people, because I get asked that question probably, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 times a year. So at least I've got an answer now, Michael. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Feel free to point people my way. So happy to chat with people about that if it's helpful.
Yeah, for sure. But look, no, that's everything for today, Michael. I think we've gone through a lot of really, really interesting topics, and I'm really honestly thankful for you coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Elliot. It was a blast, and happy to come back on anytime.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.